drive the evil force that is. And that application of Yisurin has the effect of being mamarek, or erasing the klipa itself. So fundamentally what it does, the person survives. You see. Now I'm not going to go into the mechanism at this point of how Yisurin is mamarek. How does it do that? And there's another question. The first question is, how does Yisurin mamarek, how does it do that? That's number one. And the second question is, if he's losing the klipas, you see, why doesn't Satan know it? How come he doesn't feel it? And the answer is he does not feel it.
It's not up to him.
No, but the point is, he knows when he's getting stronger, but he does not know when he's getting weaker. He doesn't know.
How do we know that?
What?
How do we know that?
Because what it is, well, he... I'm going to whole new tangent. The whole reason, and that you can't understand that until you understand the whole other thing. The whole reason, and I'll just say the statement, why the Satan was made evil to begin with. Remember what we said last week? Why was he made evil to begin with? The whole reason why he was made evil to begin with is the following. Because an evil being has the capacity for self-deception. Now, there's a reason why, and I won't explain it. A purely evil being has the capacity for self-deception. That's what it is. And there's a whole reason why that is. In order to understand, you have to understand how the Yetzer Hara seduces a man, and what the Yetzer Hara is on a person. That's a different shit. That goes into... After we finish this, we'll get into that. If he has the capacity for self-deception, that means that as he loses Oris, and Oris go back, you see, right? He loses them, he will not know it. And the Buddhism does not want it to know it. Why? Because the truth of the matter is, since he is the fundamental shaliach, or representative of the Midas Adin, he will run up and be makaplik and say, wait a minute, why should this person get the zircha to be rehabilitated?
He doesn't know that he is an instrument of Anhagas Yikut now.
He doesn't know it, exactly. What the Buddhism wants to do, you see, the thing which prevents, what allows the Bria to establish a tikkun in a hidden way, there's only one way to get about it. And that's to prevent the Satan from running up to be Makatrig. The Satan's job is the following. The Satan's job is to seduce you into a chet, and then he runs up to the Banishim and says, aha, you see that guy? That guy just did a chet. He did a chet, now I go down and kill him. So, the Satan is what's called a Mafater. He's a seducer. He's the Makatrig, he's the prosecuting attorney, and he's the Malach HaMovet. He's the executor of the din. He's all three of these things. And yes, that he does three things. You see, he's Mafata, he's Makatrig, and he's Memes. These three functions that he has are functions as a Malach. They're functions as a Malach. Those are the functions that he had in other mission before the Chet. These are the functions that he has as a Malach, as a representative of the Midas Adin. The Midas Adin uses the Satan for these functions. The Satan says, I am your employee. That's what he says to the Midas Adin. I will do what you say. So the Midas Adin says, well, first of all, you have to try and seduce men, because you have to have a Yetzer Hara. We want Pechira here, because we want to earn his chelik in Olam Haba. Fine. What happens if he's seduced and he falls? You gotta go up to Bezdin Shemal and you gotta tell them. So you're the Makatrig. You're the prosecuting attorney. And then the third thing is, well, once the Bezdin says, Ge'endik, right? Suddenly you now have the strength, you have the Oris, you've got these Oris, and with these Oris that were taken from the man, you go down and you execute the judgment, and the judgment is kill him. You see? And the Satan says, fine, that's my job, that's what I'll do. But he's a regular Malach. Now, what the Baruch wants to do is to save the Bria, or save the individual, let's say. But in order to save the individual, you see, he's got to, in some way, take back the Oris that the Satan has. Now, how does the Satan get these Oris? The Satan got these Oris because the man did a chet. So, Mitzad Adin, Mitzad the Kippur, the Satan was able to collect these Oris. You see. In order to save this man, you've got to take these Oris back and give it to the person. Because without Oris, the Neshama will not survive. Now, as soon as you begin to take out Urus from the Satan, right away he starts screaming. What are you doing? How can you do such a thing? The Mitzvah didn't say that he did a chet. What are you doing here? I'm doing my job. You can't do this. This man is guilty. He's liable. You see, you can't declare him innocent. See what I'm saying? Oh. So what the Bnei Shem has to do is take back these Urus without him knowing about it. And if he doesn't know about it, he will not be Makatrig. You see, it's to prevent the Kittrig. Do you understand this? Am I clear or is it confusing?
Use a little more
Now, what?
A little bit more.
Oh, okay. How do we prevent the Sultan from acting as a Makatrig, from attempting to prosecute and saying, wait a minute, you can't do it? By making him into an evil being. That is the entire trick. When he's a malach, and a normal malach, he sees everything that's going on. You see. And therefore, he is the agent of the din, and you can't get around that. But when he is evil, he does not see what's going on. You see. He can only see what he wants, evil. You see. And the evil nature makes him capable of self-deception. How it does that, that I'm not going to go into. But it's possible for him to be fooled. And that's what the Bnei Shem wants. By making him evil, he continues being the shliach of the din. He is, he's still that. But now he's doing it for himself. The Bnei Shem doesn't care that he's doing it for himself. You see, as long as he's representing the din, that's fine. And that's what he does. But now that he's evil, he's representing himself too. But in representing himself, he can no longer see his losing of the earth. He deceives himself. And he cannot see when he begins to be impoverished. You see. So the Urus are able to go back to the Neshama, you see, how? Because he thinks that he's going to destroy the Neshama, or give it Yisurin. He thinks he's exercising his evil nature. But rather what Yisurin does is take away Klippas. He's getting weaker, he's getting stronger, he does not know about it, so he will not go to be Makatrik about it. You see. Now, am I confused at all? Is it confusing to any degree? I'm not going into how this is done. But this is this is why the Satan was changed originally into an evil being. Because only as an evil being is he capable of self-deception, meaning that he can grow weaker and weaker and weaker in terms of losing Eretz and never know about it. His evil nature allows him to do that. He does not know that he's an agent of Tikkun. You see, he doesn't know it. And what allows that is the fact that he is evil. Now, how is that done? That I'm not going to go into. Just accept this at this point. That is why he is made into this kind of a being. You see, again, as the Satan who relates to the Hanagas HaMishpat, he has three functions. Okay? The first function is to mafater, or seduce. The second function, we all know what seduce, to attempt to get man to sin. The second function is what's called to mekatrig. That is to prosecute. He goes in front of the Bezdin Shomal and says, this man just did a chet. The third function is to ma'abed, or to execute the din and destroy. How is he able to destroy? He is able to destroy because he is strong enough to destroy, because the Urus went to him. So he can now destroy.
So what you're saying is sicknesses are not a direct result because a person did a chet, but it comes because the Satan gives.
Well, let me just the Satan, according to the Midas Hanagas HaMishpat, okay? Hey ma'am, Hanagas HaMishpat, according to the Midas HaDin, does these three functions. It does these three functions according to the Hanagas HaMishpat. The Midas HaDin, as such, the Satan is a regular malach. First understand that. How does it work? Well, it works in the following way. The Satan seduces, right? A klip is formed, and the Urus go to him. As soon as he gets the Urus, he runs up to the Shemayim and says, this man just did a chet. I have the Urus, therefore I am stronger. So the Bnei Shem says, okay, these Urus that you have now give you the koyach to be shoylet on him. Execute the din. So he runs down, and he wants to destroy. That is a scenario according to the Midas HaDin. Simple and direct. That's it. According to the Midas HaDin, this is what happens. You see, the man has a chet, he has a klippa, okay? He now gives koyach to the Satan therefore comes on top of him and destroys him with the koyach that he gained to the Satan. These are the three functions that he has as a malach to do that. Now what the Banishim wants to do is to save this person. How does he do it? Well, he's got to obviously get those Uris back. But the thing is, how do you get the Uris back and get around the Satan, whose main function is to prosecute? How do you do it? He does that by blinding the prosecutor, you see, in such a way where the prosecutor cannot see, or the Satan cannot see, when this man is being let free. Now, this is not getting around din. It's not getting around din at all. You see, you may say, well, the man is being let free for no reason at all. No, because what's happening is he's being let free because the Satan comes back and causes suffering, and from that Yisurin, he's able to go free. You see, but according to the actual Midas Hadin itself, he should not even go free. He should be destroyed. But the Hanugas HaYichud established a situation where the Satan is blinded. You see, he's got his own shell, and because he's blinded, he's got his own shell, and then he begins to cause the person suffering, and then slowly the Uris go back. But since he's blinded, he cannot see the loss. In that function, therefore, doing that, the Satan is transformed, or functions that way as a different kind of malach. You see, he functions that way as an evil malach.
So the suffering is not the execution of the destruction. It's an indirect way.
Yeshua is designed to remove the klipa and restore the person back to health.
But he sees that the person is not dead. But he wasn't able to execute.
It doesn't matter. He's able, but the Yeshua itself. We're not going to go into the entire mechanism of the thing. But the point is that he discharges his evil nature and the shvita on the Yeshua itself, and he's satisfied with that because he still thinks that he hasn't lost the Uris. You see, in that kind of sense, as an evil being, his objectives are not somewhat different. Yeah.
What are Uris?
An Uris is a spiritual koyach, or spiritual substance.
Isn't there a lot of them?
Yeah, there's a continuous supply. We went into an Uris.
Yeah, but
An Uris is a spiritual substance. It's like when it comes to the neshama, it invigorates the neshama, strengthens it. It's like food that becomes part of the substance of the neshama.
it's used up.
It doesn't get used up. It never gets used up in that sense. But it has a certain effect. It's a spiritual substance which, when assimilated into a neshama, strengthens the neshama very powerfully. Not only that it expands its being, it gives it a shlemus, it fills the being of the neshama in a much fuller sense.
You need a constant supply. You have to keep building up more and more.
No, it's not so much you need a constant supply. The supply that the neshama needs to exist is there. But this neshama cannot go into Olam Haba without a minimum amount of Uris. Because in order for the person to mezachach his guf, he must have a certain amount of Uris. The neshama has to be of a certain strength level to be mezachach the guf, to go into Olam Haba. But if the neshama does not have the sufficient number of Uris, then the person cannot go into Olam Haba, because he cannot remove the barrier of the guf. Remember, we discussed this in previous shurim. You see, am I confusing it all on this? Is this more or less clear? See, the second thing is, I'm trying to do something that I don't want to go into too much detail over here. Yet I don't want to confuse. You see what I'm saying? So I'm trying to do it. The essential concept is, like we're saying is this point. You see, that fundamentally a chait is a process called yanika. You see, when a person does a chait, a klipa comes on him and he loses the uris to the Satan. The Satan is said to be yonik, or it's nourished from that. Okay? When the Satan then comes along, Allah comes along and then gives this person suffering, he loses these uris. And that's a process of chazorah, or retrieval. And that saves the person.
Is that whether he knows, he recognizes that he's suffering?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You're saved even if he doesn't know. You see, it doesn't necessarily make him fuma. Yeshua alone has the effect of being a mark.
And this is either through tshuva or through Yisur.
Through Yeshua, yeah. Now, like I said, I don't want to go into so much, but essentially, this is a whole process that was set up in order for this to be done. And part of the things that I spoke about last week was to enable this to be done. This is the only way that can be done. Given the Midas HaDin, the only way the Midas HaYichud can really function is by blinding the Satan. In that sense. But this is fundamentally the process. So therefore, what we're concerned is basically the following. There's a concept called Chazorah. That's what we really want to know. By getting Yisurin, right, it is possible for a person to be saved, even though he does Chatoim. However, if he does too many Chatoim, then even Yisurin doesn't help anymore. You see, Yisurin will only help up to a certain level of Chatoim. Too many Yisurin too many Chatoim will not allow the thing, because too many Chatoim will not allow the Tikkun to really be established, the Chazorah to be established.
What is the Ibud?
The Ibud, yeah.
That means that Midas HaYichud is not always going to work.
Well, no, it's not always going to work. It doesn't work on that thing.
Just
But this is essentially what happens on an individual level. Okay? That's one of the main ways that Midas HaYichud works. It works very basically by making the Satan the agent of giving Yisurin, and when that happens, all the oiros that a person gave to the Satan because of the Chet go back to the person, and he survives.
Next question. When is it?
Gehenna, what is Gehenna? Okay? Gehenna fundamentally is a place, it's a mokum, or it's not so much, it's a situation or circumstance where neshamas lose their klipas, but they don't lose it through Yisurin that's given down here on the earth. Rather, they lose it after death. Now, who's the one that makes them lose it? The Satan also. The Satan can give Yisurin to the neshama while the person is living, or he can give Yisurin to the neshama while the person after death. You see, the point is that if the neshama is out of a rasha, or if the neshama has done chatoyim, he gives the koyach to the Satan. You see, once the Satan has that koyach, then the Satan now has the ability to go and give Yisurin. He has that ability. Where the Satan gives Yisurin depends on a lot of factors, and we're not going to go into that. There are certain times when the Satan will give Yisurin while a person is on the earth. You see, in that case he doesn't have to go really into Gehenna. And there are other times when this will not happen. Rather, the person will have to establish his kapora in Gehenna. Essentially, the process of Chazorah is called the process of kapora, or atonement. It is Chazorah. Yisurin is mechaper. That's what we mean. Yisurin atones. What do we mean by atones? It means it's able to retrieve the earth that the neshama lost and take them back so that it can survive. That's essentially what it means.
So what you're saying is that even in Yisurin Kapora, those do that, but I'm talking about Yisurin of Schus, talking about Yisurin of Dismamarik, even those you have to be a little bit in Haggadah Mishpat, or often seems...
you have to be Zohar. It's not the... Right,
Alright, at this point.
Which person gets Yisurin, where he gets Yisurin, how he gets it, is all determined by a lot of complex factors that have to do with the jinn of that individual. Now, I'm not going to go into, at this point, I'm not going to go into the Hatzalah or the redemption of an individual. That's not our concern here. But our concern is a much more serious process. This process here was set up on an individual level, you see, but it was never set up on a national level. It was never set up for an ummah. And fundamentally, what happened was the following. Now let me go into something very, very important and very interesting in terms of the Ummah Sa'olam. What happened to the Ummah Sa'olam, to all the Goyim? Originally, all those people, right, when the Shamas, right, that had a certain tachlis. That tachlis was to do certain mitzvahs and to take down Kedusha and Mizach Debriya, to establish Olam Haba. What happened to all those Nishamas is that they all became Rishem Gemurim. They became Rishem Gemurim, so they all established a complete Klippa. Once they had a complete Klippa by being a Rosh Hashanah, what happened? The thing was that at that point, as collectively, there was an actual withdrawal of the aura to the Satan, you see, permanently. And the neshama itself just didn't lose its earth, it didn't become weaker, it was cut in half.
Who is this?
The Goyim. I'm talking about the Goyim, or the Ummah Sa'olam. Remember we explained here what happened by all the peoples in the world? We said that originally everyone in the world had a tachlis of Adam Rishon. Correct? What happened was there was a whole bunch of these avos, of many people, these avos, right, who didn't do the tachlis at all, didn't do the mitzvahs. So what happened is they lost their neshamas. Not that they lost uris, individual uris, but their neshamas were actually reduced in size. If you remember we said that there were two effects that Tumah has, the two effects of a chet. One effect is to give klippus. When you do klippus, what happens is the neshama gets weaker, but it still is able to sustain its kedusha, it's able to sustain the tachlis of being mezachech. You remember we said that? And we said when the neshama gets worse and worse and worse, it begins to lose all its earth, so that it shrinks. Once the neshama shrinks, it no longer could do what it was supposed to do originally, which was to be mezach the bria, and that's the union of a guy. The Buddhism established that there were 70.
It shrinks in kedusha, it shrinks in physical.
Let me explain this. I'll make sure let me explain this, so that's not confusing. In the time of Adam Rishon, Adam had a certain tachlis. His tachlis, by doing the mitzvah, was to strengthen his neshama, give it certain powerful oris, right? And by doing that, that neshama could be mezach the bria, or purify the substance of the entire bria itself, and establish what we call olam haba. Okay. The people, Adam Rishon failed to do that. And even though Adam Rishon failed, the tachlis was not changed. Mankind still had to be mezach the bria to establish olam haba, except that it had to be done in a different way. The method was changed, but the objective remained the same. But after a while, people became more and more Rishoyim. Remember we said that? So what happened was the Mitzvah Din said, wait a minute, these people are such Rishoyim, let's take away the complete tachlis. Let's take away the entire possibility of these neshamas of even getting Olam Haba. You see, if you remember, hence was created the 70 nations. The 70 nations were created. Meaning that these were 70 different levels of neshamas or koyach nefesh that no longer could be mezach the bria and create an olam haba. They can no longer do it. Why can't they do it? Because their neshamas were reduced in size to an extent that they can no longer pull down the oris necessary in which to mezach the bria. They couldn't do it. The clip on the neshama became so big and so all-embracing. You see, that they didn't just lose a couple of oris here and a couple of oris there. They lost the complete size of the neshama. You see, that's what happened. And they all lost it and became different neshamas. They no longer had the koyachas nefesh which were necessary to create an olam haba. So they all became ben olam hazeh. Do we remember this? We had this year before. Okay. Now, this is basically what happened on a national level as far as the Ummah was gone. And these people were all of us. All the people who were down were of us, and they were able to determine what happened to their told their children and so on. And they all lost their koyachas nefesh. They no more had the koyachas nefesh to be mezach the bria, to establish an olam haba. Okay. That's what happened. So therefore, these people not only became double the klippus, they lost their neshamas as well. Much worse. Are there any questions? Why do I get the feeling that people may not understand me? I get the kind of that feeling, the look, I don't know. Because we went through this entire thing, but we went through I spent a whole thing on the share. I mean, that's the whole thing. Okay. Enter Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu entered the Bria, or actually, put it this way. Well, one thing. Enter the time of Noach. And I explained this also last time, a very important thing. Before the time of Noach, you had many people around, right? They were all Rishoyim, correct? Now, the Mitzvah Din said, these are all Rishoyim. You see, they're all Rishoyim, and because of the Rishoyim, they have to be destroyed. Correct? What happened was the Midas Hadin then went ahead and destroyed the entire world. It destroyed the entire world except for Noach. After Noach, after the Mabul and the world was destroyed, the Bonishim said to Noach, I'm going to make a new covenant with you, a new bris. And the covenant I made with you is I will never again destroy the world. That's what he said, right? Now, remember what we said? What was that covenant that he made with Noach? What do you mean he never would destroy the world? What he meant was the following: that even if the world, the people of the world become Rishonim Gemum, I will never destroy the entire Bria anymore. Instead, I will reduce the Neshamas. Because what it was is the following: before the time of Noach, either you were Ben Olam Haba or you weren't. That's it. The only two possibilities: either you had the koyach to be mezachik the bria, you see, or you had no koyach at all.
So the yichud wasn't there?
No, the yichud did not establish that principle at that point. It didn't do it yet. That was the union of the haptocha that the Bonishim gave to Noach. You know, before Noach, the yichud, which attempted to save the world, could not save the world. It could only save the world by saying, let's kill everyone and keep this one guy. That's the way the Yichud was able to save the world. But Yichud was not able to create a new type of beings, which didn't have Shaykhs to Olam Haba. You see, before Noach, either you had Shaykhs to Olam Haba, or you didn't have Shaykhs to anything. You died, and that's the end of it. What happened was that the Bonishim finally said after Noach that I'm going to change the plan. Yichud is changing the plan. Is that even if the world, again, it reaches the levels of riches that it did at that point, I will not destroy the world. In other words, even if those people have no more shaykhs because of their riches, they clip us and the riches on them to be mezach the bria, I will not destroy them. What will I do? I will create a new category of man. That category is called a goy. That is a person who doesn't have shaykhs to Olam Haba, but he doesn't have to be destroyed. What is he? He's in the middle. He's a ben Olam Hazeh.
But that was only fixed at Mount Torah.
No, yes, it was fixed at Mount Torah, yes, but it was the concept. The idea came to be by the time of Noach. The concept of the goyim came at the time of Noach. That's when the idea first came out. It didn't happen until Mount Torah. The Bonishim gave all the people a chance not to go that direction. You see, but the possibility of saving mankind by making them goyim or ben olam hazeh without having to destroy them was guaranteed to Noach.
Well, that was only possible because Noach was available. If Noach wasn't there, then the whole thing would have made any sense.
Yes, right. It couldn't have made that when he was available. He was saved. Okay, so the Ummah Olam therefore were destroyed. I mean, the Ummah Olam were therefore reduced in size, and it became Ummah Olam. They were Ben Olam Hazeh. That's the end of it.
What's going to happen to these people when
now wait a minute. Hold on 1 second. I'm sorry. What's that?
What's going to happen when Olam Hazeh is up?
Olam Hazeh, to who? To the Goyim? Most of them will not be around anymore.
Isn't Hashem make a haftacha that wouldn't happen again?
The haftacha was that he wouldn't destroy them entirely, but rather he would give them a different chelik.
So what's that all about?
That chelik is Olam Hazeh.
So that means they will not be...
Well, what about their children?
Who?
No children will be born? What happens?
What's going to happen?
When?
I don't know, at a certain time, right? When that's the end of Olam Hazeh, what happens to all the people?
What happens?
The people that were born that week.
I mean, all the people that the Chesh Benin, the people who are.
There won't be almost.
New government being born daily, right? What happens to them when they?
Has a special Deutsch account.
You're going into You're going into the concept of what's happening in the time of Moshe Mashiach.
How's it possible to say that they're not all going to be destroyed?
Who? You go into the concept. You go into the concept of the union of what happens in the Moshe Mashiach. Will there be children in the Moshe Mashiach? What will they look like? You see, that's what you mean, because the end of Olam Hazeh is the Moshe Mashiach. The end of it. So the child is, what's going to happen in Moshe Mashiach? Are people going to still have kids? And the answer is yes and no.
What I'm saying is, how is it possible that they won't all be destroyed?
Who? No. What I'm basically saying is the following: that all those people who are part of the Goyim, who are part of the Ummah Olam, right? Those people will not go to Olam Haba. plain and simple. They will not go to Olam Haba unless in some way they've done something specific or something extra to earn it. But as a goy, they cannot earn Olam Haba in terms of the chelik that they have as a goy.
So what's the difference between one person and a nation? You're saying that you're making the difference between Noach and, let's say, the Jews.
Yeah.
But because the Jews won't be destroyed, everyone else will be.
No, I didn't say. Well, we're getting to the Jews now. At the time of Noach, the concept was before Noach, everyone was destroyed except Noach, right? After Noach, there was a new concept that was created that even if a person is not a Ben Olam Haba, he can be a Ben Olam Hazer. That's it. That was created after Noach.
That's what the Haftarah was?
That was the Haftarah of Noach. That's what the Rebbeinu meant. I won't destroy the world again. What do you mean I won't destroy the world again? It means I won't. It means just because the people now don't have any shaykhs to the tachlis of Adam Rishon doesn't mean that I'll take them off the face of the earth. I'll give them another tachlis, another kind of avodah, another objective where they become goyim, become ben olam hazeh. That's all.
Is there something funny about the number one?
Why
was it people?
What?
Why is just Noah?
Why is
happen that way?
He's the only one who does.
Why is he the only one who remained a tzaddik?
Why did it work out that way? I mean, if it's just...
Of course it worked out that way.
He had a free will.
That's an interesting point. Rav says that by Avraham Avinu also 10 days later was only one.
That's the way it worked out.
It could have been many. It could have been many. 10 days later, Avraham didn't have to be the only one who would father a nation. Could have been many. He was the only one Zoichet. It's ironic. It did happen to work out that way.
Okay, it worked out that way. I mean, it wasn't programmed that way. Noach had a bechira, just like everyone in his generation. They all saw him building the ark, and he kept on telling him what's going to happen. No one wanted to listen. Why didn't they want to listen?
Because they were shocked. They made their own choice. Now, like he said, why did it happen? There was one person that out of I don't know how many people, right?
Well, one rational explanation is.
Why was there one? Why wasn't there any? Or
Well,
Each person has a free will, and nobody will.
There was
People
more.
do the right
There was
thing.
just
That's it.
There was one thing going from Noach. You see, there was a shalshelos. There was one thin lineage all the way from Shes all the way down to Noach. From Adam Rishon's all the way down, there was a parentage that they passed down the tradition, the true belief, and all that. There was though these mishpachas had a predisposition to being tzaddikim, I would say. While everyone else was turning into
why was it stronger than the
that whole family lineage that's numerated out in Parshas Bereshis. So the Gad so and so.
Let's not delve into that question. It's
one element, it's one factor.
It's an aspect. It's a curious aspect which has to be treated. Yes, it has to be treated. But at this point, we'll have to leave that go. Why Noach? Why Avraham? We'll have to leave that go. Why these individuals somehow able to do it? That kind of sense.
They somehow able to survive the model. What's happening?
Statistically, it should be maybe 2,
Well,
3.
No, please. There's a no.
It's supposed to predict what's going to happen,
But there are certain problems with that. But I'm not going to go. Let's not go into that.
I hear.
Let's not go into that kind of thing. The point is, that's what happened with Noach. He was a tzaddik.
I hear what you're saying.
History. Let's go on.
Guy has 10 kids. Why does one guy good in school and weak in something?
Well,
What would happen if...
go on.
It's hard enough to understand what.
Aspects to this that we can examine. We can't examine all aspects. Each aspect will take us far afield. Your question really goes into a whole different aspect, which is first of all, your questions are very difficult. There are very problematical issues with what you're asking. Whether you know it or not, it's a very deep question. It is. But to go far off from that is a whole field unto itself. And it suffices to say at this point that this is established. This is essentially what happened de facto. That Noach was the man, obviously, that was able to make it, and so on. Okay, now what happened by the time of Avram? The Bereshit said to Avram that from you I will make a nation, and from your Toldos, all the people that are your Toldos will retain the neshamas that have capacity to be mezach the bria of Olam Haba. In other words, you and your Toldos will retain the original tachlis of Adam Rishon. That's the essential concept. Now, just to reinforce that concept, I just want to reinforce that concept and tell you the following, the inyan of a bris. Avraham Avinu was mitzvah on the bris. Okay? And I'll just show you exactly what it was mitzvah on a bris. Okay? He has to be circumcised. Now, what's the inyan of a bris? I'll just go for a slight tangent here because it's interesting to note. What is the inyan of a bris? The Medrash says that when Adam Rishon was born, he was born circumcised. He was already male when Adam was born. Which means that Adam, the organ of Adam, did not have a foreskin. He didn't. He was born circumcised. After Adam did the chait, he grew a foreskin. It's an incredible thing. He grew a foreskin. He became an orel, and so on. What was the meaning of that? What's the meaning of being an orel, an uncircumcised individual? Well, essentially, is the following. There's a symbolism between the male sexual organ and the bria itself. There's a specific symbolism, and there are many very deep aspects of the thing. Without going into the thing and so on, the organ itself, on the top of it, has a crown. The foreskin covers the crown. Now, the organ itself symbolizes, in many cases, the state of the bria in terms of ruchnius. What happened was that when Adam did the chait, as he did the chait, the Sitra Achron, the Satan, went into the bria. Remember we said that? He infiltrated the entire existence. So he mixed the entire bria with a state of tumah. Okay? What that fundamentally did was to create a new level of Hester in the bria. Hester meaning that the awareness of the Bnei Shalom became more distant. Because tumah was the bria. The awareness of ruchnius became much more difficult. Much more difficult. The awareness of ruchnius. Because of the tumah and the bria. And Adam fell many madregas because of that. That Hester is represented by the ola, or the foreskin. The atorah, or the crown, which is on top of the male organ, symbolized the bria in the state of a level of hasagas yichudoi. The crown, which is shaped like, is a symbol of malchus, of a melech. The atorah, it's called an atorah, a crown, which is on top of the male organ, symbolizes the bria in a state of hasagas yichudoi, or a state of kedusha, where the awareness of the Bnei Shalom is clear. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because the awareness of the malchus, or the shlit of the Bnei Shalom, is clear. The foreskin, which is a covering of that crown, represents the world in a state of Hester, where there's a lack of hasagas yichudoi, when the absolute malchus of the Bnei Shalom is unclear or obscure. So what happened was, symbolically, the spiritual event of reality symbolized itself in Adam's, the male organ of Adam. It symbolized itself in that way. So that, because of the chet that he did, he was master yichud in the bria. So the simon of that yichud was also hidden, you see, and an ola grew over it. The ola, the Satan is called the ola of the bria. That's what he's called. He's called the foreskin of the bria. The Satan is to the bria what the ola is to the organ. It has an exact parallel. So what happened was, when Adam Rishon did the chet, he grew an ola, because the bria grew an ola. You see what I'm saying? By the time of Avom, the Avom Bereshim came over to Avom and says, take off the ola. Why? Because you must restore what Adam failed to do. You see? We see this with Avom had the exact same tachlis as Adam. In other words, just like it was Adam's tachlis to bring the bria to a level of kedusha where there is no ola, you see, but he failed. He brought the bria down to a level of kilkul, and he brought an ola into the bria. The Bnei Shalom said to Avom, from you must now continue this tachlis. You must now restore the bria to a level of hasagas yichudoi, to a level of kedusha. And symbolically, that is represented by circumcision. The Bnei Shalom said, on the 8th day, take off the ola. This is your tachlis. Your tachlis is to undo the damage of Adam Rishon. Your tachlis is to remove the ola from the bria and re-establish the world to a matzav of shlemus, or kedusha. That's the mitzvah of milah. And why the mitzvah was given to Avram. It is a direct counterpart. You remove the ola which Adam brought onto the world, but you do it symbolically through a circumcision. But it essentially is the tachlis of every Jew. Every Jew who is born, who comes from Avom, has a specific task of undoing the damage of Adam, because in some way he was connected to it. He's all connected to Adam, and removing the ola from the bria. That's the tachlis of every Yid. So symbolically we see this. We see this, how this task was carried on. Okay? Kind of go into this. What the Bonishim said to Avram was the following. The Bonishim said to Avram the following. From you, your children will remove the all of the Bria. They will have this tachlis. And when they have this tachlis, they will all go into Eretz Yisrael, and so on, and they will all live, they will all be of a multitude. I promise you, he said, that all your children will go into Eretz Yisrael. They will be Zoicha to Olam Haba. You see, that's what he said. Avram said a very good question. He said, by the Bris Ben Absom, he said, but Ma'ida, how do I know this? The Bonishim told Avram that I promise you that your children will inherit the land. It means that your children will inherit Olam Haba. Your children are the ones who will continue the tachas of Adam Rishon. Okay? So Avram said, sounds good. B'mo'eda, how do I know? So the Bonishim said, how do you know? So the Bonishim said the following. I will take your children, your descendants, and I will put them into the land of Egypt for 400 years. You see. And after that, they will leave the land of Egypt, Eretz Mitzrayim, and they will leave with a great reward. That's what the Bonishim said. That's in the Brit Bein Absalom. It's in the Chumash. So you ask yourself the question, what exactly went on over here? What did Avram say, and what did the Bonishim answer? The Bonishim told Avram that I guarantee that your children, you see, will inherit Olam Haba. So Avram says, how do I know? What do you mean? If the Bonishim says that's going to happen, how could you say, how do I know? What Avram was saying was an Eisen Akasha. He's saying, how do I know? You're telling me that my kids are going to enter Olam Haba? How do I know? What happens if my kids become Rishayim? What happens if they all become Rishayim? Then what happens? What happens is that their neshama, right, after having so many klippas, is cut in half. You see, once it's cut in half, that's the end of Olam Haba. You ask me, how do I know? Well, look at the rest of the world. What will exempt my children from the same thing that happened to the rest of the Ummah Olam? How can you guarantee me something that's always possible of being lost? As long as there's Bechira, as long as there's free choice, a person can become a Rasha. Right? If a person can become a Rasha, he can completely nullify the whole object of Olam Haba. What's the proof? Everybody else did. That's what Avram said to Bonisham. He said, the very fact that you're coming to me and not to everyone else is a sign that it's possible to blow it. Because why don't you go to the rest of the world? The answer is, they failed. And since they failed, they no longer have the neshama that's capable of Olam Haba. So how can you call and guarantee it to me? How do I know that this would happen to my own children? How do I know that they will also not lose Olam Haba? Because they're Rishayim just like it happened to the rest of the world. How do I know that for my children, they will not become, that number 71 will not become another Ben Olam Haba like everybody else? You see, and nobody's over that line. You all see the question? That's what Avram asked them. So the Bonishim answered, I will put them into Mitzrayim, and they will come out after that with a great inheritance. What was the answer? What was the answer? What kind of answer is that? I'm going to put them in Mitzrayim. So the Bonishim said, what? What happened was the Bonishim said the following. I am going to construct a new mechanism that does not exist. You see, it does not exist. And what it is a mechanism which will ensure the fact that your children will survive. What's that mechanism? That mechanism is the following. When a person is Averis, right, Chatoim, he loses the Averis to the Satan, right? And if the person is still has certain schusim, the Satan gives him a surim and it goes back. But that's only true on an individual level. On a national level, meaning that if many people in the Ummah become Rishoyim and the totality, there's no way to save the Ummah. You see. That's it. There's no way to save them. And that's what happened to all the Goyim. So the Bonishim says, I will now design the same Chazorah mechanism to the nation, to all your children. So that what happens is that if your children are not Zoicha, all their Uris, you see, will go to the Satan. But there's something new that's going on over here. And what's that? It's the following. Here you have the Satan, okay? Here you have Klal Yisrael, right? here you have the Umas Olam. Okay? When a single Jew does a chet, right? What happens? The Oris go where? To the Satan. The Satan, if he's Zeichetu, is Miyasim, so it goes back. You see? That's established. Now the Umas Olam are all Ben Olam Hazer. Where do they get the Koyach from? The Umas Olam. They get it fundamentally from the Satan. They lost all their Koyachs, and all the Oris really reside in the Satan. You see, that's why they became the Umas Olam. Most of the Koyach of a Nefesh that comes to a Goy comes from Tumah, or the Satan himself. Because that's where the Neshama, when you shrank the Neshama and you reduced the Neshama of a Goy, it shrank so that it now has mostly Shaykhs to the Satan. That's where it gets most of its Koyach. You see, what the Buddhist told, now what happens if all the Jews do Chatoim? Or there's a great number of them, so what happens to them? The answer is, there's no way to save them. And that's what Avon was saying. What Avon was saying is, what happens if the Ummah, you see, the Ummah begins to do many Chatoim as such. And the individuals in the time of Avon were very powerful. Because if they do Chatoim, you see, they were all of us. It would affect everyone after them. That's why they had that power. So Avon said, good, I'm a tzaddik. But what happens if my son is not a tzaddik? Or his son? We're still of us. Which means that if one of my grandchildren, you see, doesn't do the right job, he can destroy the entire situation because he's still an Ov. You see what I'm saying? That's what Avon was saying. So the Baruch said the following: no, they will not destroy the situation. Why? Because I will do something new. Normally speaking, on an individual level, this happens. It goes to something and it's Chazorah back. But what I will do is establish a new thing, such that the Uris will go from the Jews, right, to the Satan, and go into the koyach that it gives to the Umas Olam. In other words, what happens is if the Jews are not Zurich in certain sense, the Uris are lost to the Satan, but the Satan now fuses those Uris, and those Uris are absorbed into the Umas Olam. The Umas Olam begin to take on the Uris. Before, you never saw that concept. In a Ma'aser Chet, the only one who took on the strength, the only one who became stronger was the Satan himself. He became stronger. But what the Buddhism says, no, what will happen now is that when the Yidden lose their Uris, the Satan will become stronger, but the Umas Olam will also become stronger. Whoever takes their sustenance from the Satan will also become stronger. So the Satan and all his shluchim, all his tributaries, will also become stronger. Do you see what I'm saying? Now what happens if that occurs? Then I will take the Yidden and put them into the Umas Olam in a shibud, goy mikerev goy. I will take the Jewish nation and put it into that Ummah, and that Ummah will cause suffering on the Yidden. When that happens, what happens? The Uris go back. That is a new mechanism that was established, that was never there before. You all understand what happened? What happened before was simply that if a person did a chet, it went to the Satan and then it went back. There was a transaction between the person and the Satan. That's all. But what happened now is that there's a transaction between the person or the Ummah and the Satan and the representative of the Satan, which is one of the Ummah's Olam, and then it goes back by Yisrael going into the Shlita or the Shibud or the servitude of the Ummah itself. You see my point? This is the new mechanism that's established. That's why the Baruch said to Avon that your children will be slaves in Egypt for 400 years. What does that have to do with Avon? What he said was, this is the mechanism that your children, even if they become Rishoyim, will be able to take back the Uris by going under the servitude of a nation, of another nation. You see? And when it goes under the servitude of another nation, it draws it back. How does it get it back from the other nation? Because that nation gets it because of its Koyach HaTumah that comes from the Satan. You see? And where did the Satan get it from? He got it from the Chatoim of the Yidden. You see? That is the new circle that will be established. And that circle will ensure that the nation will survive.
How is that better than the other way? Why couldn't they get straight back from the Satan?
What's that? I'm sorry, what's that?
Oh, you're saying as a nation...
As a nation it survives, not as an individual. An individual may or may not survive, but the Ummah survives. And the nation means that there exists a collective individuals who will get to Olam Haba. The nation survives. Individuals in the nation may not.
There's two concurrent transactions, the individual and collectively.
Yes, there are two separate transactions. There's a transaction which was established between the individual and the sultan to get it back, but there's a new mechanism where there's a transaction between the nation and the sultan through the Umas Olam, through the medium or the vehicle, the instrument of being an Umas Olam. You see what I'm saying? That was a new mechanism. Now, what the Bunishim said was the following. Which Ummah is going to take the Uris? The Bunishim said, Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim is going to take the Uris. You see? In other words, whatever Chatzronim happened and so on and so forth, Mitzrayim will get the Uris. And that's why Mitzrayim became stronger and stronger and stronger. It's not by accident that Mitzrayim was the strongest nation in the world at that time. They were the strongest nation in the world at that time because they had the Uris, you see, that were coming from the world and from the Eden and all the individuals who had shaykhs to this. You see what I'm saying? That's why they were the most powerful nation in the world. And the Jews could only go into the shibud of the most powerful nation in the world. Only. So what happened is the Jews went into Mitzrayim. And after with the Mitzrayim for 210 years, they went out and they impoverished Mitzrayim. There was nothing left of Mitzrayim. And interestingly enough, in ancient history, in Egyptian history, Mitzrayim was the greatest nation on the world for a long time, from about 2600 BCE, in the time of the Great Pyramid and so on, all the way down to about 1200 BCE. They were the greatest. They were the age of the empire. In fact, one of the greatest of all the pharaohs was Ramses and Thutmose. And Ramses, who was one of the greatest pharaohs of all time. It was the age when Egypt expanded the empire and so on. At the end of the 12th century BCE, Egypt declined. And it never again became a power. You know what happened in the 12th century? Matan Torah. The Jews left Egypt. Once they left Egypt, they took everything back. Egypt fell like a skeleton. And after that, it declined in world history, never to be ever again. You find, for example, the same thing that happened, for example, in Spain. When Spain, after the Spanish threw out the Jews, and the Jews had suffered and they threw them out, after that, Spain went down as a world power. In the 16th, 15th century, they went down already. They lost to England. The Spanish Armada was destroyed and they went down. The funny thing is, whenever the Jews go into a nation and they suffer there, once they go out, that nation then shrinks. Why? Because they lose the Uris. There are exceptions to that rule, which we'll go into later. But that's what happened to Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim shrank. Because Mitzrayim was only built up only because of the fact that it had Uris that didn't belong to it. It had Uris that belonged to someone else, to another Ummah, to Klal Yisrael. By Klal Yisrael going into the Ummah, it takes it back, and that nation then shrinks.
Because of the problem that the Klal Yisrael wasn't doing that much time at that time.
Well, I don't want to go into
how... How is the Mechiras Yosef though? According to this Anochi, you resolve the Chazal that Bama Ego was the cause of Shuvah Mitzrayim, and also Mechiras Yosef.
Yeah, okay, but let's get... now I want to go into one more thing, which is the Inyan. How was this mechanism established? The Bunishim said the following. The Bunishim said that I will guarantee that your children will survive because I am establishing this mechanism. But how did the Bunishim establish this mechanism? Even though this mechanism came from Midas HaYichud to save the world, because it had to save a remnant for the Tachat of Adam Rishon, correct? It had to save that remnant. But what the Bunishim said is that I have to establish this mechanism in some way through Midas Hadin. How did he establish it? How did he establish the mechanism? That mechanism, you see, that it is possible to impoverish a nation and take back the mechanism whereby Uris go to a nation and then they can lose it, had to be established first before Klal Yisrael can use it. Before the Jews went into Egypt, you see, the mechanism already existed. It had to be established. Who established that mechanism?
No, Yosef.
Who?
Yosef
established it. Who was the mice of Yosef? The brothers sold Yosef and they sold him to Mitzrayim. He went into Mitzrayim and suddenly he found himself in the greatest Makom Tum in the world. And he still remained a tzaddik. You see, he remained a tzaddik in the clip of Mitzrayim. Right? by remaining a tzaddik in the keep of Mitzrayim, he took back Mitzara Din, all the Uris of Mitzrayim, himself, single-handedly. So that, once he took back the Uris, he became their Melech. Before Yosef got to Mitzrayim, Mitzrayim was the biggest one of all. They had all the Koyach of Tumah, and they had all the Uris, which were taken from the Jews, from the Yidden and so on, and the people who had Shaykhs to the Chet Avon Rishon. They had that. There was no way, there was no pipe. This pipe did not exist. The Buddhists wanted to establish the pipe, but this pipe did not exist. You needed someone to go and make the pipe. So what the Buddhists did was, he sent Yosef into Mitzrayim, through the Achim, and when they sold Yosef in Mitzrayim, Yosef stood fast in Mitzrayim.
Could have been any other country.
No, but that time it was Mitzrayim. It could have been any other country, whoever had it. Yosef was Mitzrayim, remained a tzaddik, and by remaining a tzaddik, what happened was he created the pipe. You see, but he also created the pipe for himself. So what happened is he took out a certain substantial. See, there was no. It's like there's no road here. He paved. What Yosef did was, for example, you have two cities. Between the two cities, there's no road at all. It's all wilderness. So you take a person, the person goes, and he slowly begins to shape a road. He walks back and forth, and he creates a path. Once that path is created, there is now a conduit between the two cities. You see, you can go from one city to another. You see, now people later on can go over and widen the road. They can put a pavement on the road. They can really make it look like a super highway. But you need someone to first make the path. The one who makes the path is a forerunner. Yosef made the path. You see, what did he do? He went to Mitzrayim. He was Omed ben Asoyan. By being Omed ben Asoyan, he took back a certain amount of the Uris of Mitzrayim, Mitzara Din. You see, the path had to be created Mitzara Din, and Yosef was a tzaddik Mitzara Din. By being Omed and Omed ben Asoyan, he took back a certain amount of Uris and created the first path where the Uris could go, leave the Ummah and go back into a person that grabs it back. You see, once he had the Uris, then he became the political head of Mitzrayim. Because what happens is the following. Whatever happens in the spiritual world follows suit on the physical world. That's the thing. The only reason why Yosef was able to be the Melech of Mitzrayim, why was Yosef able to be the Mishnah Melech? Why? Where did he get that koyach from? He was able to be the Mishnah Melech because he was Omed ben Asoyan in Mitzrayim. And therefore he took certain Uris, and by taking certain Uris, he now was over them. He had the Shrita. He had the power. He robbed them a certain aspect of their power. So he was able to govern them. So politically, the political events followed the spiritual events. All those years that he was Omed ben Asoyan, he was slowly doing things on a ruchnistic level that was invisible. You see, he was collecting Uris from that nation called Mitzrayim. Until one day there was enough collected, and suddenly the spiritual aspect suddenly affected the physical reality, and suddenly he was made a king of Mitzrayim. You see, and now he was showing it on them, but he established the path. Once he finished the path, then the Jews as a nation, Yaakov then came down, and the Jews were born and so on, and then as a nation they lived in Mitzrayim, and as a nation they can pull back the Uris of Mitzrayim. You see what I'm saying? He first made the first path. That's why the Medrash says that when Yosef was sold, the Medrash says Yaakov is occupied with his mourning because he lost Yosef. Yosef is occupied with his mourning because he lost the whole family. You see, Yehuda was occupied with the Shidduch, Tamah, and the Bonishim was occupied with building Yemos HaMashiach. Why? Because this is the central mechanism. Yosef established this mechanism is the way that Klal Yisrael will be redeemed till the end. And that's why we call the Mashiach ben Yosef? Remember we say the Mashiach ben Yosef is the koyach who's able to go into the klipa and take back the Uris from the tumah. Remember we said Yosef is the process that takes the bria, the world, from a state of kilkul, tumah, to a state of tahara. And David takes it from tahara to kedusha. You see, now how do you take the world from a state of tumah to a state of tahara? You've got to fight the klipa. How? You go into the tumah, you Omed ben Asoyan, you see, and then you pull back the Uris. When when you pull back the Uris, the tumor has no more ore, so it leaves. The world is in a state of tahara. It is purified. You see what I'm saying? That's exactly how the union of Yosef works. That is the union of the Mashiach ben Yosef. That is the process of Yosef. You see what I'm saying? It's all connected. It's the same person. Yosef is the one who establishes the union of Yosef. The process called Mashiach ben Yosef. That's why the whole koyach comes from Yosef HaTzadik. You see how this works? But he established it so that it can be applied to the entire nation.
He did it with Din.
Yes, he did it with Din, but Yichud always works first through Din. It's got to first have some aspect of Din. Once the mechanism is there, then Yichud could expand on it and take advantage of a lot of other situations, you know? Once the president, for example, Reagan declares a tax break because of a certain special interest group, then everyone takes advantage of the tax break. You see? In a sense, what?
Is there a comparison for somebody doing tikkun through Din or from Yichud?
Yes, it's much. The one
is much higher level than
Din. Yes, Din. Right.
So therefore, he was so powerful because he did it through Din.
Right. Yeah, Yosef did it through Din. That's why Yosef's power is awesome, because Yosef's power is pure Din. But what Yosef did, Yosef established the larger mechanism for the entire nation. You see, but he did it as an individual because he had the koyach of what's called the Mashiach ben Yosef. He was the shurish. He was the origin or the source of that power. And what is that power? The way we've been talking till now, that power is the ability to remove the bria, to take away tumah from the bria. How do you take away tumah from the bria? That's Yosef. Yosef takes away tumah from the bria. David brings kedusha into the bria. How does Yosef take away tumah from the bria? How does the process work? Look at Yosef himself. It works when a man goes into a klippa, into the tumah, is omed ben Asoyan, and then he pulls back the Oris.
So not through Yisur.
No, Yosef didn't do it through Yisur. Yosef did it by being omed ben Asoyan. Right. He did it by omed ben Asoyan. Once that mechanism is established, then it can be done by Yisurin and many, many other ways. But somebody has to create a path that goes back. Yosef created that path. This was the haftacha then that was given to Avram, you see. And you see how the entire might of Yosef is connected with Avram. Yosef was the fulfillment of the haftacha that the Bereshim gave to Avram. You see. And that's what the Medrash says. That when Yosef was sold, everybody was crying with Gavaldik Tzoros, right? But the Bereshim said, the Bereshim was building the light of the Mashiach. Because the whole light comes from this kind of process. The only way to save the world from its tumah is by this process.
But why was he sure then? Abraham asked, how will I know? Why by Rebbeinu told him that I'm going to send the Eden to the Mitzrayim, it's going to work? Why? I mean, Yosef wasn't born at that time. There was no Yosef at that time.
Well, what the Bereshim did was the Bereshim gave... if not Yosef, there would have had to have been some individual.
What's haftacha?
The haftacha is the following. That is... The haftacha is that there will be an individual. One individual is going to make it. One individual is going to go into an ummah and be made by a tzaddik in that ummah and pull back Oris from the ummah. A part of Chazor.
That's not free will.
Who? No. The Bereshim, no. It is. You remember the Maisa there with Yosef and the wife of Potiphar, right? And Yosef didn't know what to do. He was thinking back and forth. So the Medrash says that at that time Yaakov appeared to him, right? And he said to him, what happened was the following. That when Yosef was about to sin with the wife of Potiphar, he saw a vision of his father. And his father said, don't do it. He said, because if you do it, you will lose your schus as a nation. You see. So Yosef held through, and he didn't do it. He was Omer ben Asoyan. That was the main thing which was considered the tzidkus that he did. It was the main mice of the Psalm. What Yaakov was essentially telling to Yosef was the following. Don't do it. Why? Because if you do it, you will lose your incomplete chelik. You will no longer be a shevet. What Yaakov showed him, he showed him a picture of the V'tumim, the breastplate of the coin, and he showed him one stone was missing. And that was the stone of Yosef. And he said, or he showed him the breastplate, and he said, if you do it, if you fall, you will lose that. Schus as a shevet. That's what he said.
But
what really was going on was much deeper. What Yaakov was saying to Yosef, don't do it, because you have a special task. If you're only B'Lesoyin, you will be creating a new mechanism in the Bria which will allow the Bria to go on. You see, now, let's say Yosef would have failed.
let's say
Yosef had Bechira. Please, let's say Yosef would have failed. Right? What would have happened is, the Banisham would have sent in someone else.
But that you're going on the premise that there was a Yaakov already. By the time Abraham Avinu, there was no Yaakov.
He didn't tell him name.
You didn't name the name?
No, but
he will go out to the Sushkada.
What was the haftocha that there will be a tzaddik after him? What was the haftocha?
I mean, that they would even be a Yitzchak and Yaakov at all, in that kind of sense.
You were working already in the premise that there was a Yaakov.
I mean, because he waited down for Yosef.
Yeah.
The mechanism itself, the truth of the matter is, the mechanism itself was slowly being established even before Yosef. Basically. What?
Yeah, but he gave him haftocha that there will be somebody who is going to continue this path. Who and how?
His haftocha was the following: that even if they don't continue in this path, there will be a mechanism that will be established that will retrieve the Uris that they lose.
I would establish in a different way earlier and probably more.
You see what I'm saying? That was that. The haftocha was that even if they don't follow in this path, you have nothing to worry about. There will be someone that will maintain this path. Why? Because I will see to it such that the Uris will be able to come back. I will create a new mechanism where the Uris will be able to come back. You see, that's what he said. That's all he said. He didn't say who would bring it back or how it would occur. The Banisham simply said, don't worry. From you will never come a nation of Goyim. Will never be. From you will never come a nation of Olam Hazeh. People who only have Shaykh to Olam Hazeh. From you will always come people who have Shaykh to Olam Haba. Always. So Avram said, how do you know this? How do I know that they won't lose it? So Avram said, why? So the Banisham said, why? Because I'm going to create a mechanism which will ensure that, so that there will be people who will survive in this way. And that's what he told them. Now, how did the Banisham go ahead and create the mechanism? He created the mechanism slowly through Yitzchak Yaakov in other ways, but the final one who created that path was Yosef. And once Yosef created the path, he finished it, then after that, the Jews were able to go into Mitzrayim and pull back the Uris of Mitzrayim. But only after the path was constructed. And the one who constructed fundamentally that path was Yosef HaTzadik himself. That was the koyach of Yosef. And that was the haftocha of the Banisham, that someone will create that path. It didn't have to be Yosef.
Yeah, I understand.
He could have failed.
I'm working on the premise. My question was, why there was no Yitzchak at that time?
No, there was no one at that time. And so on. Now, the point is, Yitzchak and Yaakov also had to do with creating that path. Especially Yaakov. When Yaakov went to Lovan, and he went into Golus, in Lovan Gati, the Taig Mitzvahs Kiyamti. Even though I wanted to Golus, I still kept the Taig Mitzvahs. This is an Inyan of Yosef. This thing was continuously to establish through all the others. But it was finalized and it was perfected with Yosef himself. With Yosef himself. And once the mechanism was perfected by Yosef, it could then be applied. And then Yaakov came down, and the children of Israel were born, and then they went into Egypt for 200 years, they went to the Yisurin, they were free, and they pulled back all the Uris. And they went out, and they had Matan Torah.
Where did they lose the Uris between Avram and Yosef?
One thing is the Bechira.
Good question.
Great people, right?
Yeah, good question. That's a very... The Uris...
They're already in there, So I was thinking that, but they're already down there.
That's a very profound,
Yaakov already went down
an
from
excellent question
the
that you're asking, and I'll just speak in terms of briefly in terms of that. Those Uris were lost. You know where those Uris were lost? Those Uris weren't necessarily completely lost only by the Jews. But the following what happened, this is what the state of the situation was. That in the time of Noach and the time before, there was a tremendous number of Uris that had the capacity, right, to be Mazach the Bria. When most of the world became Goyim, what happened to all those Uris that were needed to Mazach the Bria? You see, all those Uris were in the Sultan, they were in Tumah.
Well,
those Uris were lost by the original Goyim, by all those people from the time of Adam to the time of Vom, lost all those Uris. You see, now they lost the Uris and they themselves were shrunk into new things. But what happened to the Earth themselves? Those Earths went into the hands of the Sultan. The Sultan held it.
For some reason, Mitzrayim was chosen.
Wait a minute. And it was held it until Avram came along, and the Banishim says, you've got to get all those Earths back. You and your children. You've got to tachlis because you need all those Earths to be Mezach, the whole Bria. You see? So Avram said, well, even if I get them back, how do I know I won't lose them again? That's what he was saying. You see, so the Baruch says you will not lose them. Because what it is I'm going to take those Oris and now they're stored in the Sultan, but I'm going to store them in one of the nations that he has, which is Mitzrayim. One of the Ummahs is Mitzrayim, and they'll be stored here. And I will create a path that goes back to you. So that even, you see, they go at you. So therefore, even if you're losing them, you'll be getting them back, and whatever was lost in the entire world will be going back. Everything will be going back to Klal Yisrael in the Shibud of Mitzrayim.
Okay, but that won't have a mention in the
Who? Those Oris too. All the Oris that were lost.
Esau was B'nai Avram.
Actually, essentially what's correct. Yes. What it basically means is, what the Avram was really saying is the following. How do I know that my children will be able to restore all the Oris? Not only for my children. We widened it. Your question, we widened the point. It's not that the Banishim said, your children will go have Olam Haba. That's true. Avram didn't only say, well, how do I know that my children will have Olam Haba? Maybe they will lose their own Oris. It meant it was much more profound. What the Banishim was saying, that you and your children will collect all the Oris that you create, and all the Oris that were lost before, that are necessary to come back in order for Olam Haba to be established. So Avram said, fine. If my children are not tzaddikim, they will lose their own Oris and everyone else's Oris too. So how do we know that we're going to guarantee Olam Haba? So the Banishim said, because I will store those Oris in Mitzrayim. And I will store whatever Oris your children lose in addition. Everything will go to Mitzrayim. And then I will create a path, you see, ultimately through Yosef, where it can be retrieved. And then your children will go into Mitzrayim, and then when they do that, in the Shibud of Mitzrayim, your children will retrieve all the Oris that were ever lost.
That's the parish of Kush Gadol, down south.
All the Oris that were ever lost will be retrieved by your children in Mitzrayim. So therefore, when the Jews left Mitzrayim, they had all the Oris. Well, if they had all the Oris, what happens when you have all the Oris back? It should have been yes. And the answer is yes. That the truth of the matter is that the Matan Torah was supposed to be the Yemoitz Mashiach. Exactly. The only reason why it wasn't Yemoitz Mashiach is because of the Egel Azov, the Erevav, the Chet of the Egel. Well, not for the Chet of the Egel, then all the Jews would have gone into Eretz Yisrael, and there would have been the Yemoitz Mashiach. It would have started then, and Olam Haba would have started X amount of years after.
Is that the time we lost Iris by the Egel again?
They lost it all again.
By the Egel.
The Egel, they lost it all.
So this is the process of collecting it.
Yes, they lost the right, they were collecting, exactly. That's exactly what happened. They collected it all by Shibud Mitzrayim. They collected it all. They should have had Yemoitz Mashiach. They lost it by the Egel. So it again was pushed in other nations.
So now it's a process of collecting.
Now we begin to understand the concept of Golus. What is the concept of Golus? Golus is the concept of collection. You see, we will go into that next time more fully. We can begin to understand this is the mechanism which begins to explain the interaction of the Jews throughout history in all the different nations. Because each of these nations at different points in time get different Oris for different reasons. And the Jews have to go through different Ummahs to continuously collect them back. That's the thing. We will discuss this more.
And the reason why Mitzrayim was the first one to store Iris?
Why? There's a reason. We're going to that also. The next time we'll discuss is exactly what is now the connection. This paradigm shows us the connection of the meaning of Golus and the meaning of how Jews relate with the Ummah Olam. You see, next time we will examine much more. There's much more to be examined. But now you understand the mechanism itself.